I do want to warn you before you watch, the chapters, or listen, however. My hair continually gets worse, but I do hope you like and subscribe this video. Yeah, it would really help me grow. And if you have any book recommendations, or if I say a word wrong and you want me to say it right, if it appears more in the book, just leave it down in the comments. If I am able to turn them on, I turned them on in my last video, but I don't know what happened in the first chapter. But yeah, if I just say something wrong, just correct me, and that's about it. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy. Hello, welcome back. I'm going to be reading Animal Farm Chapter 3. I might include Chapter 4 in this video because I'm feeling kind of lazy and don't really want to edit all of them. So let's just get right into it. Chapter 3. How they toiled and sweated to get to the hay, but their efforts were rewarded, but their harvest had even been bigger success than they had hoped. Sometimes the work was hard. The implements had been designed for human beings and not for animals, and it was a great drawback that no animal was able to use any other tool that involved standing on his hind legs. But the pigs were so clever that they could think of a way around every difficulty. As for the horses, they knew every inch of the field and in fact understood the busyness of mowing and raking far better than Jones and his men ever had done. The pigs did not actually work, but directed and supervised others with their superior knowledge. It was natural that they could assume the leadership. Boxer and Clover would harness themselves to the cutter or the horse rake. No bits or reins were needed in these days, of course, and tramp steadily around the field, with a pig walking behind them and calling out, "Gee up, comrade," or "Whoa back, comrade," as the case might be. And every animal down the humming bluffs worked at turning the hay and gathering it. Even the ducks and the hens toiled to fro all day in the sun, carrying tiny wisps of hay in their beaks. In the end, they finished the harvest in 2 days, less time than it had usually taken Jones and his men. Moreover, it was the biggest harvest that the farm had ever seen. There was no wastage whatever, and the hens and ducks, with their sharp eyes, had gathered up every last stalk, and not an animal on the farm had stolen so much as a mouthful. Give me just 1 second. The lemonade got stuck in my throat. All through the summer, the work of the farm went like clockwork. The animals were happy as they had never conceived it possible to be. Every mouthful of food was an acute positive pleasure now that it was truly their own food, produced by themselves and for themselves, not doled out to them by a grudging master with the worthless parasitical human beings gone. There was more for everyone to eat. There was more leisure, too, inexperienced though the animals were. They met with many difficulties. For instance, later in the year, when they harvest the corn, they had tread it out in the ancient style and blow away the chaff with their breath. Since the farm possessed no thrashing machine, but the pigs, with their cleverness, and Boxer and his tremendous muscles, always pulled them through. Boxer was the admiration of everybody. He had been a hard worker even in Mr. Jones's time, but now he seemed more like 3 horses than 1. There were days when the entire work on the farm seemed to rest in his mighty shoulders. From morning to night he was pushing and pulling, always at the spot where the work was hardest. He had made an arrangement with one of the I'm going to say this right. Cockerels? I'm not sure. To call him in the mornings half an hour earlier than everyone else, and would be put in some volunteer labor at whatever seemed to be most needed before the regular day's work began. His answer to everyone's problem, every setback, was, "I will work harder," which he had adapted as his personal motto. But everyone worked according to his capability. The hens and ducks, for instance, saved 5 bushels of corn at the harvest by gathering up the stray grains. Nobody stole, nobody grumbled over his rations, and the quarreling and biting and jealousy, which had been formed features of life in the old days, had almost disappeared. Nobody shrieked, I think it shrieked, or almost nobody. Molly, it was true, was not good at getting up in the morning and had a way of leaving work early on the ground that there was a stone in her hoof, and the behavior of a cat was somewhat peculiar. It was soon noticed that when there was work to be done, the cat would never be found. She would vanish for hours on end, and then would reappear at meal times, or in the evening after work was over, as though nothing had happened. But she had always made such excellent excuses and purred so affectionately that it was impossible not to believe her in good intention. Old Benjamin, the donkey, seemed quite unchanged since the rebellion. He does work in the same slow, abstained way as he had done in Jones's time, never shrieking and never volunteering an extra work either. About the rebellion and its result he would express no opinion. When asked whether he was happier now that Jones was gone, he would say only, "Donkeys live a long time. None of you has ever seen a dead donkey." And the others had to be content with this cryptic answer. On Sundays there was no work. Breakfast was an hour later than usual, and after breakfast there was a ceremony which was observed every week without fail. First came the hoisting of the flag. Snowball had been in the harness room in an old green tablecloth of Mr. Jones and had painted on it a hoof and a horn in white. This was run up the flagstaff in the farmhouse garden every Sunday morning. The flag was green, Snowball explained, to represent the green fields of England, while the hoof and the horn signified the future republic of the animals, which would arise when the human race had finally been overthrown. After hoisting of the flag, all the animals trooped into the big barn for general assembly, which was known as the meeting. Here the work of the coming week was planned out, and resolutions were put forward and debated. It was always the pigs who put forward the resolutions. The other animals understood how to vote, but they could never think of any resolutions of their own. Snowball and Napoleon were by far the most active in the debates. But it was noticed that these two were never in agreement. Whatever suggestion either of them made, the other could be counted on to oppose it, even when it was resolved the thing no one could object to in itself. It was aside the small paddock behind the orchard as a home for the rest of the animals who were past work. There was a stormy debate over the correct retiring age for each class of animal. The meeting would always end with singing of Beasts of England, and the afternoon was given up to recreation. I think that's what that says. The pigs had set aside the harness room as a headquarters for themselves. Here in the evenings they studied blacksmithing, carpenting, and other necessary arts from books which they had brought out of the farmhouse. Snowball also busied himself with organizing the other animals into what he called animal committees. He was indefatigable, I'm not sure if I said that right, at this. He formed in the egg production committee for the hens, the clean tails league for the crows, the wild comrades re-education committee. The object of this was to tame the rats and the rabbits, the whiter wool movement for the sheep, and the various others, besides instituting classes in reading and writing. On the whole, these projects were a failure. The attempt to tame the wild creatures, for instance, broke down almost immediately. They continued to behave very much as before, and when treating the generosity, simply took advantage of it. The cat rejoined the education committee and was very active in it for some days. She was seen one day sitting on the roof and talking to some sparrows who were just out of her reach. She was telling them that all animals were now comrades, and that any sparrow who could come and perch on her paw, but the sparrows kept their distance. The reading and writing classes, however, were a great success. By the autumn, almost every animal on the farm was literate in some degree. As for the pigs, they could already read and write perfectly. The dogs learned to read fairly well, but they were not interested in reading anything except for the 7 Commandments. Miro the goat could read somewhat better than the dogs, and somewhat used to read to the others in the evening from scraps of newspaper, which she found on the rubbish heap. Benjamin could read as well as any pig, but never exercised his facility. I'm really not sure. So far as he knew, he said there was nothing worth reading. Clover learned the whole alphabet, but could not put words together. Boxer could not get beyond the letter D. He would trace out A, B, C, D in the dust with his great hoof, and then would stand glaring at the letters with his ears back, sometimes shaking his forelock, trying with all his might to remember what came next, and never succeeding. Only on several occasions he did learn E, F, G, H, but by the time he knew them, it was always discovered that he had forgotten A, B, C, and D. Finally, he decided to be content with the first 4 letters, and then used to write them out once or twice every day to refresh his memory. Molly refused to learn any of the 6 letters which spell her. Molly refused to learn any but the 6 letters would spell her own name. She would form these very neatly out of pieces of twig and would decorate them with a flower or 2 and walk around them admiring them. Give me 1 second. Oh, my throat hurts. None of the other animals on the farm could get further than a letter A. It was also found that the stupider animals, such as the sheep, hens, and ducks, were unable to learn the 7 commandments by heart. After much thought, Snowball declared that the 7 commandments could, in effect, be reduced to a single maximum, namely 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. Then, he said, contain the essential principle of animalism. Whoever had thoroughly grasped it would be safe from human influences. The bird at first objected, since it seemed that they also had 2 legs, but Snowball proved to them that this was not so. A bird's wings, comrades, he said. It's an organ of propulsion and not manipulation. It should there be regarded as a leg. The distinguishing mark of a man is the hand, an instrument with which he does all of his mischief. The bird does not understand Snowball's long words, but they did accept his explanation, and the humbler animals set to work to learn the new maximum by heart. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, was inscribed on the wall of the barn above the 7 commandments in bigger letters. When they once got it by heart, the sheep developed a great liking for this maximum, and often, as they lay in the field, they would start belting it, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, and kept it on for hours, never growing tired of it. Napoleon took no interest in Snowball's committees. He said that education of young was more important than anything that could be done for those who were already grown up. It happened that Jessie and Bluebell had been whelped soon after the hay harvest, giving birth between them 9 sturdy puppies. As soon as they were weaned, Napoleon took them away from their mothers, saying that he would make himself responsible for their education. He took them up to the loft, which could only be reached by a ladder from the harnessing room, and then kept them in such seclusion that the rest of the farm soon forgot their existence. The mystery of where the milk went to soon cleared up. It was a mix every day into the pig's mash. The early apples that were now ripening in the fully grassed orchard was littered with windfalls. The animals had assumed that the matter of course would be shared equally. One day, however, the order went forth, and all the windfalls were to be collected and brought to the harnessing room for the use of the pigs. At this sum, the other animals murmured, but it was no use. All the pigs were full agreement at this point, even Snowball and Napoleon. Squealer was sent. Hi, Leo. He just walked in the room. Squealer was sent to the necessary explanations to the others. Comrades, he cried, you do not imagine. I hope that we pigs are using this in the spirit of selfishness and privilege. Many of us are actually dislike of milk and apples. I dislike them myself. Our sole object in taking these things is to preserve our health. Milk and apples, this has been proved by science, comrades, contain substances absolutely necessary to the well-being of a pig. We pigs are brain workers. The whole management and organization of this farm depends on us. Day and night we are watching over your welfare. It is not for your sake that we drink the milk and eat the apples. Do you know what would happen if If we pigs failed in our duty? Jones would come back. Yes, Jones. would come back. Surely, comrades, cried Squealer, almost pleadingly, skipping from side to side and whisking his tail. Surely there is no one among you who wants to see Jones come back? Now, there's one thing that the animals were completely certain of. It was that they did not want Jones to come back. When it was put to them in this light, they had no more to say. The importance of keeping this pig in good health was too obvious, so it would be agreed, with further agreement, that the milk and the windfall apples, and also the main crop of apples when they were ripened, should be preserved for pigs alone. I'm going to be reading chapter 4 in just a minute. Okay, I grabbed some iced tea because in the last video it sounded like I was like way out of breath. Like eventually I was like, I'm so sorry. Not last video, I'm including it. The last last chapter. Hopefully I won't sound so out of breath. So give me a second to just get on the right page. Yeah, why don't I start? I'll start including the page numbers in one. Page 33. Of course, I'm just gonna start at the chapter. I'm gonna start at the chapter, but yeah, let's get started. Chapter 4. By the late summer, the news of what happened on Animal Farm had spread across half the country. Every day, Snowball and Napoleon set out flights of pigeons whose instructions were to mingle with the animals on neighboring farms, tell the story of the rebellion, and teach them the tune of Beasts of England. Most of the time, Mr. Jones spent sitting in the tap room of the Red Lion at Wellington, complaining to anyone who would listen of the monstrous injustice he had suffered in being turned out of his property by a pack of good for nothing animals. The other farmers sympathized in principle, but they did not at first give him much help. At heart, each of them was secretly wondering whether he could not somehow turn Jones's misfortune to their own advantage. It was lucky that the owners of the farms which adjoined Animal Farms were pretty in bad terms. One of them, which was named Foxwood, was a large, neglected old-fashioned farm, much overgrown by woodland, with all of its pastures worn out and its hedges in a disgraceful condition. I'm so sorry. Its owner, Mr. Pillington, was an easygoing, gentle farmer who spent most of his time in fishing or hunting according to the season. The other farm, which was called Pinchfield, was smaller and better kept. Its owner was Mr. Frederick, a tough, shrewd man, perpetually involved in lawsuits and with the name for driving hard bargains. These two disliked each other so much that even for them to come to any agreement in defense of their own interest. Nevertheless, they both thoroughly frightened by the rebellion on Animal Farm and were very anxious to prevent their own animals from learning much about it. At first, they pretended to laugh at the scorning idea of animals managing a farm for themselves. Oh, it's still happening. What the heck? The whole thing would be over in a fortnight, they said. They put it about that the animals on Manor Farm, they insisted on calling it the Manor Farm. They would not tolerate the name Animal Farm. Were perpetually fighting among themselves and were also rapidly starving to death. When time passed and animals had eventually not starved to death, Frederick and Pillington changed their tune and began to talk of the terrible wickedness that now flourished on Animal Farm. It was given out that the animals were practiced cannibalism, tortured one another with the red-hot horseshoes, and had their females in common. This is what came of rebelling against the laws of nature, Frederick and Pillington said. However, these stories were not fully believed. Rumors of a wonderful farm where the human beings had been turned out and the animals managed their own affairs continued to circulate in vague and assorted forms, and throughout that year of rebelliousness ran through the countryside. Bulls, which had always been tractable, suddenly turned savage. Sheep broke down hedges and devoured the clover. Cows kicked the pail over. Hunters refused their fences and shot their riders on the other side. Above all, the tune, and even the words of Beasts of England were known everywhere. It had been spread within some astonishing speed. The human beings could not contain their rage when they had heard this song, though they pretended to think it was merely ridiculousness. They could not understand. They said how even animals could bring themselves to sing such competence rubbish. Any animal caught singing it was given a flogging on the spot, and yet there was a song was irrepressible. The blackbirds whistled it in hedges, the pigeon cooed it in elms. It had gotten din in the smothers and the tune of church bells, and when the humans listened to it, they secretly trembled, hearing it. A prophecy of their future doom. Early in October, when the corn was cut and stacked, and some of it was threshed a fight of pigeons, came whirling through the air and aligned in the yard of Animal Farm. In the wildest excitement, Jones and all his men, with a half a dozen others from Foxwood and Pinchfield, had entered the 5-barreled gate, and were coming with up the cart track and led to the farm. They were all carrying sticks, except Jones, who was marching ahead with a gun in his hands. Obviously, they were going to attempt a recapture of the farm. This had long been expected, and all precautions had been made. Snowball, who had studied an old book of Julius Caesar's campaigns, which he had found in the farmhouse, was in charge of defense operations. He gave his order quickly, and in a couple of minutes, every animal was at his post. As the human beings approached the farm building, Snowball launched his first attack. All the pigeons, to the number of 35, flew to the fro over the men's heads and muted upon from the mid-air. And while the men were dealing with this, the geese who had been hiding behind the hedge rushed out and pecked viciously at the calves of their legs. However, this was only a light skimmering maneuver. It said to create a little disorder, and the men easily drove the geese off with their sticks. Snowball now launched his second line attack. Muriel, Benjamin, and all the sheep, with Snowball at the head of them, rushed forward and proceeded and butted the men from every side, while Benjamin turned around and lashed at them with his small hooves. But once again the men with their sticks and their hobble-nailed boots were too strong for them, and suddenly, at a squeal from Snowball, which was the signal to retreat, all the animals turned and fled through the gate, way into the yard. The men gave a shout of triumph. They saw as they imagined their enemies in flight, and they rushed after them in disorder. This was just what Snowball had intended. As soon as they were well inside the yard, the 3 horses and the cow and 3 cows and the rest of the pigs, who had been lying in ambush in the cowshed, suddenly emerged in the rear, cutting them off. Snowball now gave the signal for them to charge. He himself dashed straight for Jones. Jones saw him coming, raised his gun, and fired. The pellets scored bloody streaks along Snowball's back, and the sheep dropped dead. Without halting for an instant, Snowball flung his 15 stone against Jones's leg. Jones was hurled into a pile of dung, and his gun flew out of his hands. But the most terrifying spectacle of all was Boxer, rearing up on his hind legs and striking out with his iron-shod hooves like a stallion. His first blow took a stable lad from Foxwood on the skull and stretched him lifeless in the mud. At the sight, several men dropped their sticks and tried to run. Panic overtook them, and the next moment all the animals together were chasing them around and round the yard. They were gored, kicked, bitten, trampled on. There was not an animal on the farm that did not take vengeance on them after their own fashion. Even the cat suddenly leapt off the roof onto a cowman's shoulders and sank her claws in his neck, at which he yelled horribly. At a moment when the opening was clear, the men were glad enough to rush out of the yard and make a bolt for the main road. And within 5 minutes of their invasion, they were innocuous, retreat by the same way as they had come, with a flock of geese hissing after them and pecking at their calves all the way. All the men were gone, except one. Back in the yard, Boxer was pawing with his hoof at the stable lad, who had laid face down in the mud, trying to turn him over. The boy did not stir. "He is dead," said Boxer softly. "He had no intention of doing that. I forgot that he was wearing iron shoes. Who would believe that I did not do this on purpose?" "No, sentimentally, comrade," cried Snowball, from whose wounds the blood was still dripping. "War is war. The only good human being is a dead one." "I have no wish to take a life, not even a human life," repeated Boxer, and his eyes were full of tears. "Where is Molly?" exclaimed everybody. Great alarm. It was feared that the men might have harmed her in some way or even carried her off with them. In the end, however, she was found hiding in the stall with her head buried among the hay and the manger. She had taken to flight as soon as the gun went off, and when the others came back looking for her, it was to find that the stable lad, who had been in fact only stunned, had already been covered and made off. The animals now resembled in the wildest excitement, each recounting his own exploits in the battle on top of his voice. An impromptu celebration of victory had been held. The flag was run up, and Beasts of England was sang a number of times. Then a sheep who had been killed was given a solemn funeral. A hawthorn bush being planted on her grave. At the gravesite, Snowball made his little speech emphasizing the need for all animals to be ready to die for Animal Farm it need be. The animals decided anonymously to create a military decoration, Animal Hero, First Class, which was the conferred there, and the only Snowball and Boxer considered of brass metal. They were really some old horse brasses, which had been found in the harness room, to be worn on Sunday and holidays. There was also Animal Hero Second Class, which was conferred posthumously on the dead sheep. There was much discussion on as what the battle should be called. In the end, it was named the Battle of Cowshed, since that was where the ambush had been sprung. Mr. Jones' gun had been found lying in the mud, and was known that there was a supply of cartridges in the farmhouse. It was decided to set the gun up at the foot of Flagstaff like a piece of artillery, and to fire it twice a year, once on October the 12th anniversary of the Battle of Cowshed, and once on Midsummer Day, the anniversary of the rebellion. Thank you for staying till the end of this chapter. I do hope you enjoyed it, and like I said at the beginning, if there's any words I mispronounce and you want me to, and if they might come out like later on in the book and you want me to say them correctly, just comment below and I will try to correct myself, like I said. And please like and subscribe. It would really help my channel grow, and I will be reading Reddit stories later today because I need a break from reading Animal Farm. But yeah, I do hope you enjoyed the book, and I'll continue to read it next week, hopefully sooner than Sunday. Most likely I might read it around like Friday and Saturday. I know, not that much sooner, but I do my work pretty late. I procrastinate a lot. Please don't procrastinate like I do. Anyway, bye. Hope to see you next time.